Hi, and welcome to this presentation on UU history entitled Everything You Wanted to Know About Unitarian Universalism. Well, just about everything. The author Robert Penn Warren wrote, "History cannot give us a program for the future, but it can give us a fuller understanding of ourselves and of our common humanity so that we can better face the future." Let's start with Unitarianism. It has its roots in Christianity. It rejects the idea that God exists in three beings and promotes the idea that God is one, Unitarianism. It was developed in 16th century Europe and traces its roots to Transylvania, Italy, Poland, and Switzerland. Unitarianism was deemed a heresy by the Catholic Church because it denied the divinity of Jesus. And it was championed by Transylvanian King John Sigismund through his Edict of Toleration. Let me tell you a little bit more about King John. He was open to hearing ideas about religious doctrine. This was in the 16th century. And he decided to have a series of debates between Unitarians and Trinitarians. The debate lasted 10 days and began, get this, at 5 a.m. each day. A preacher named Francis David represented the Unitarians. He was famous for saying, "They're not paying me enough for this." Actually, what he really said, and what has great meaning, is, "We need not think alike to love alike." A quote that is famous now in Unitarian Universalism lore. David did such a good job that the Unitarians were declared the winners, and many in Transylvania embraced Unitarianism. Later, the king declared that he himself was Unitarian, thus becoming the first and only Unitarian king. As a postscript, after the death of King Sigismund, the Catholic Church began to take hold in Transylvania, and Unitarians found themselves persecuted. Francis David continued to preach the doctrine and was eventually arrested and found guilty of the crime of innovation. He was condemned to prison for the remainder of his life and died in the royal dungeon on November 15th, 1579. The other famous Unitarian martyr is Michael Servetus. He's the gentleman on the left. The guy on the right, I don't know who he is, but I think he's saying, "Leave me alone while I'm reading. Can't you see I'm chained to my work?" Servetus published a book entitled On the Errors of the Trinity. Eventually, he became a marked man during the Spanish Inquisition, and he went underground, fleeing to Paris. He changed his name, went to medical school, and became a doctor. He began corresponding with John Calvin of Calvinism. He eventually was exposed, arrested, and tried for heresy, and Calvin himself served as the prosecutor. He was burned at the stake in 1553, and nearly all the copies of his last book, translated as The Restoration of Christianity, were destroyed after his death. Only 3 copies remain, and I know where they are. Universalism also had its roots in Christianity. It rejected the Calvinist doctrine of the elect, which held that the fate of all people was determined long before people were even born. Universalism believes that if there is a God, it must be a loving God, and that all souls will be saved. This is the concept of universal salvation. All will be saved. Universalism. It has its roots in Philadelphia and Boston, and in the 1700s represented a split from Puritan churches, particularly in New England. And now, my friends, here is our Unitarian Universalist miracle story. You never know which way the wind blows. It can change directions, and maybe it can change your life. It happened to John Murray. Murray had a fine education, a steady job, a loving wife, and a young son. Life was good, and then everything changed. His wife and son became sick and died. John lost his job, all his money, and was put in jail because he could not pay his debts. He was a religious man, a Universalist, who had even preached about that loving God. But now he was not so sure what he believed. He felt his life was over. Friends urged him to go someplace where he could start again. So leaving England, he sailed for America on a ship named the Hand in Hand. The wind blew the ship toward their destination, which was New York. But then fog rolled in and the ship ran aground on a sandbar in New Jersey. Oh no, not New Jersey. John and a few others volunteered to leave the ship, go on land, and get directions and supplies. As he was walking ashore, he saw a farmhouse with a small chapel. It belonged to Thomas Potter. Not Harry Potter, Thomas Potter. Potter greeted Tom, gave him food for everyone on the ship, and invited John to come back and have dinner with him that night. When John came back, Thomas Potter showed him the chapel. He told John that he had built the chapel and was waiting for God to send him a minister. You, John, are that minister. I have waited for you a long time. John didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to preach anymore. He said, I can't preach on Sunday because as soon as the wind changes, my boat will set sail and I must be on it. And then Potter said to Murray, the wind will never change, sir, until you have delivered to us in that meeting house a message from God. If the boat has not sailed by Sunday, will you preach? Asked Thomas Potter. And Murray said, if I am still here on Sunday, I will preach. Now, boys and girls, what do you think happened? Did the wind blow? Did the hand in hand sail away, taking John Murray with it? Well, this wouldn't be much of a miracle story if it did. No wind blew, no ship sailed. John Murray preached on Sunday morning, September 30th, 1770, in the chapel Thomas Potter built for him many years before. The winds of change blew yet again for John Murray. He now wanted to preach more than anything, and he did for many years, and he helped found Universalism in America. And we, as Unitarian Universalists, owe a special thanks to Thomas Potter. It was his hospitality that brought John Murray back to the pulpit. And we also owe a special thanks to the wind that gave us John Murray and Universalism in America. So in the history of Unitarian Universalism, Unitarians were thought to be more intellectual, well-educated, wealthier, and represented the urban elite. Whereas Universalists tended to be farmers, the poor, working class, people living hard lives, particularly in rural areas. The Reverend Thomas Starr King wrote, Universalists believe that God is too good to damn people, and Unitarians believe that people are too good to be damned by God. And yet, in 1961, these two disparate groups, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America, met to consider a merger. Out of that gathering, the Unitarian Universalist Association was created, and our 7 original principles were born. And now, here's a quiz for you. How many Unitarian Universalists are there currently in the United States? Well, if you said 50,000, sorry. How about 1 million? No, there aren't that many of us. There are actually 165,000 Unitarian Universalists currently in the United States. We do represent over 1,000 congregations, most of them small, across the country. We are small in number, but our influence is great. And as I'll share with you shortly, Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists have helped to change the world. But first, many people wonder about the flaming chalice, our unofficial symbol. The symbol had its origins in a logo designed by Austrian refugee Hans Deutsch for the Unitarian Service Committee, which is now the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. And this was during World War II. The Service Committee was new, founded in Boston to assist Eastern Europeans, among them Unitarians as well as Jews, who needed to escape Nazi persecution. Deutsch took his inspiration from the chalices of oil burned on ancient Greek and Roman altars. The holy oil burning in it is a symbol of helpfulness and sacrifice. The flaming chalice design was made into a seal for papers and a badge for agents moving refugees to freedom. It became an underground symbol in occupied Europe during World War II for assistance to help Unitarians, Jews, and other people escape Nazi persecution. And now, just a few famous Unitarians in history. Olympia Brown. She was the first woman to be ordained by any denomination, and that was in 1863. She took an active role in the women's suffrage movement and was one of the few original suffragists who lived to vote in the 1920 presidential election. Pretty cool, huh? Ralph Waldo Emerson. In 1838, Emerson gave an address which started the Transcendentalist movement. He said that all of creation is a part of God, and that we can find the holy in everything and everywhere we go. It was a reaction to the more rational and intellectual practices of Unitarianism. Reverend James Reeb, a Unitarian Universalist minister, Reeb was beaten to death in Selma by white men armed with clubs after eating dinner at an integrated restaurant with two other Unitarian ministers. Dr. Martin Luther King delivered the eulogy at his memorial service. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. She was one of the first African-American women to be published in the United States. She worked on the Underground Railroad and was a member of the American Women Suffrage Association, and she traveled throughout the South, speaking on education, civil rights, and the need to bring an end to the practice of lynching. Thomas Jefferson was not a Unitarian, although he did hold Unitarian beliefs and once said that he would like to be a member of a Unitarian church, but there were no Unitarian churches in Virginia at that time. He never formally joined any denomination, proclaiming, "I am of a sect by myself as far as I know." And interestingly, Jefferson edited the Bible to remove all references to Jesus's miracles, and it became known as the Jefferson Bible. And now a list of some of the famous Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists throughout history. This is just a partial list. P.T. Barnum, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Charles Darwin, Alexander Graham Bell, Dorothea Dix, Christopher Reeve, Superman, Sylvia Plath, Carl Sandburg, Frank Lloyd Wright, Pete Seeger, Henry David Thoreau, Kurt Vonnegut, Albert Schweitzer, Walt Whitman, John Adams, Ray Bradbury, Louisa May Alcott, Clarence Darrow, Linus Pauling, Herman Melville, Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, William Howard Taft, Rod Serling. Just a few of the famous Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists who have helped to change the world. And for our purposes, the most famous Unitarian Universalist is none other than our own Reverend Peter Friedrichs. Thanks for taking this history trip with us.